guys, I have been working on this family project for quite some time during the semester of my Healthy Livings class, and I'm going to give a little synopsis on the diseases that run in my family, the description of them, a healthy plan for me moving forward, the risk factors, etc. I have done page after page after page of notes and research. I'll cite everything at the end. So bear with me, it's going to be a little lengthy. But let's start with the description of the diseases that run in my family. Depression. Depression is a mental health condition that affects how a person feels, thinks, and behaves. It's more than just a feeling sad or going through a rough patch. It's actually a serious imbalance in the brain that can impact somebody's daily life. Scientifically, it involves changes in brain chemistry, especially with neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, we all love the dopamine, and norepinephrine, which all help regulate mood and emotions. Neurotransmitter dysregulation, basically, like I said, it's the dysregulation of neurotransmitters. Deficiencies in these neurotransmitters are what leads to these depressive symptoms. Alterations in neurotransmitter availability and receptor sensitivity are implicated in the effective manifestations of depression. Structural and functional abnormalities in specific brain regions are consistently observed in individuals with depression, and scientifically, volumetric reductions in the hippocampus and medial prefrontal cortex have been documented. These changes are associated with illness, progression markers, including a number of depressive episodes and treatment resistance. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that's basically what governs stress response. That often exhibits hyperactivity in depressed individuals. This dysregulation leads to elevated cortisol levels, contributing to neuronal damage in stress-sensitive regions like the hippocampus that we just talked about. Let's see. Ultimately, depression can be triggered by many factors, including genetic stress, trauma, and even long-term health problems. It's basically not something that somebody can just snap out of. It usually requires treatment like therapy, medication, or both to help manage these symptoms and improve the quality of life. Now, moving along to number 2 disease in my family is diabetes. Diabetes is a long-term health condition where the body has trouble controlling the amount of sugar, basically called glucose, in the blood. What's supposed to happen is when we eat, our body breaks down food into glucose, and then a hormone called insulin, which is made by the pancreas, helps that glucose get into our cells to be used as energy. But what happens with diabetes is something goes wrong in that process. There are 2 different types of diabetes. The most common types are type 1 and type 2. In type 1, the immune system basically attacks the pancreas by mistake, destroying the cells that make insulin. So people with type 1 diabetes do have to take insulin because their body just doesn't make it anymore. With type 2 diabetes, it's more like the body still makes insulin, but the cells don't respond to it like they should. That is called the insulin resistance. And over time, that pancreas can just get worn down from trying to keep up. And if glucose can't get into the cells, it builds up in the bloodstream, which can cause all sorts of serious injuries like nerve damage, heart problems, kidney failure, and vision loss, especially if it goes untreated. Lifestyle choices, genetics, and other health conditions can increase that risk of developing diabetes, especially type 2. And managing diabetes usually involves keeping track of blood sugar levels, eating carefully, staying active, and sometimes using medication or insulin. It's not something that just goes away, but with the right care, it can be controlled pretty well. Next up, we have the big ugly C, cancer. Cancer is basically when cells in the body stop following its rules. Normally our cells grow, divide, and die in a very controlled way. But with cancer, something goes wrong in that system. The cells start growing out of control. They don't die when they're supposed to, and they just keep multiplying, which creates a mass called a tumor, unless it's blood cancer like leukemia, which doesn't form solid tumors. What causes this to happen is often a mix of things: changes in the cell's DNA, which is called mutations, exposure to harmful substances like tobacco smoke or UV radiation, certain infections, or even inherited genetic defects. These mutations mess with the genes that control cell growth and repair. For example, if a gene that usually tells cells when to stop dividing gets damaged, the off switch doesn't work anymore. The really dangerous part of this is when cancer cells spread to other parts of the body. This is a process called metastasis. They can travel through the body, through blood or lymphatic system, and start new tumors elsewhere, which makes treating it way more complicated. And cancer isn't just one disease either. There are over 100 types, depending on where it starts and how the cells behave. That's why treatment varies so much. Some people need surgery, others need chemo, radiation, targeted drugs, or a mix of everything. Sorry, that screeching is my son. The good news is that the research has come such a long way and survival rates have improved a lot for many cancers. Next thing up is something I personally as a student dealt with, and it was not easy. It's miscarriage. It was the first time I got pregnant. I was young, and we heard the baby's heartbeat and everything. Next time we go in, there was nothing. So emotionally, it was really hard. And a miscarriage is when a pregnancy ends on its own before the baby can survive outside the womb. Usually that's before the 20th week. It's something that just happens more often than people realize, especially in the early stages. And that's not something I knew because it wasn't really anything that anybody talked about in regards to pregnancy, but it actually is really common. So what's going on scientifically is that the body recognizes that the pregnancy isn't developing properly and it naturally stops. So most of the time, it's not because of anything that the pregnant person did wrong. One of the biggest causes is a problem with the chromosomes in the embryo. So basically, when the sperm and egg come together, they bring half genetic information from each, but if there's a mistake in that process, like a missing or extra chromosome, the body often can't support the pregnancy and it ends. There can also be other reasons like hormonal imbalances, issues with the uterus, immune system problems, or infections. In some cases, there's no clear explanation, which can make it even harder emotionally, which was kind of basically what happened with me. A miscarriage can involve bleeding, cramping, and passing a tissue, but the experience is different for everyone. Even though it's medically common, it is still deeply personal and painful. Emotionally, it can bring feelings of grief, confusion, and even guilt, even though the science shows that most miscarriages cannot be prevented. Now next, moving along, we have high blood pressure. High blood pressure, or what we call hypertension, is basically when the force of blood pushing against the walls of your arteries is too strong for too long. Our heart pumps blood through these vessels to carry oxygen and nutrients, and the pressure that blood creates as it moves is normal. But when that pressure stays elevated over time, it puts a serious strain on the entire circulatory system. What's tricky about high blood pressure is that it usually doesn't show obvious symptoms right away, so people can have it for years and not know it. That's why it's often called the silent killer. I'm sure you've heard that. Behind the scenes, it's slowly damaging the blood vessels, making them less flexible and more narrow, which forces the heart to work harder to keep the blood moving. There are often a lot of factors that can lead to it. Things like eating too much salt, being overweight, smoking, stress, or even just having family history of it. Over time, if it's not managed, high blood pressure can lead to serious complications, like the heart attacks we hear about, strokes, kidney failure, and vision problems. Now, my mother's side of the family's worst nightmare coming at you now is thyroid disease. Thyroid disease is basically when something goes wrong with the small little butterfly-shaped organ in the front of your neck called your thyroid gland. And even though it's tiny, it plays a huge role in keeping your body balanced because it makes hormones that control your metabolism, basically how fast or slow your body uses energy. So there are two main ways that the thyroid can misfire. If it makes too much hormone, it is called hyperthyroidism, and it can make everything speed up, and that includes your heart rate, your digestion, how anxious or jittery you feel. Now on the flip side of that is hypothyroidism, and that's when it makes too little hormone, and that can slow everything down, causing fatigue, weight gain, cold sensitivity, and even brain fog. So thyroid issues can be caused by a few different things. Sometimes it's the immune system that turns against the thyroid, like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which causes hyperactivity, or Graves' disease, which causes overactivity. Other times it might be linked to iodine levels, certain medications, or even nodules or growths on the gland. My aunt actually just had her nodule removed, so she's got a big scar across her throat. It's pretty gnarly. The thing is, symptoms can be subtle or mistaken for other issues, so it often goes undiagnosed for a while. Luckily, blood tests that measure TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone, and thyroid hormone levels can usually detect problems early. He's crazy, I'm sorry. And treatments like hormone replacement or medications to slow it down are very effective. And last but not least, my father's least favorite, just ask him, is Meniere's disease. This is something that really affected me and my brother growing up because all we saw was dad lying in bed for months, even years. It started with seizures, which is the scariest thing to witness as a child, especially seeing it for the first time. And then trial medication destroyed all the nerves in his legs, causing him to become wheelchair bound. The neurologist removed the back parts of his skull, and then came the diagnosis of Meniere's. Meniere's disease is a chronic inner ear disorder that messes with your balance and hearing. And what's happening is that there's too much fluid building up in the part of the inner ear called the endiolymphatic system, and that pressure just throws off how your ear communicates with your brain. It's kind of like your ear is sending the wrong signals or getting overwhelmed, and that causes a chain reaction of symptoms. And the most noticeable thing that people feel during the episode are vertigo, which is more than just dizziness. As my dad explains it, it feels like the whole room is spinning. A ringing or buzzing sound in the ear called tinnitus, and a sense of fullness or pressure in the ear. And hearing loss that tends to come and go at first, but can become permanent over time. Fun fact, we actually did 2 years of sign language because we thought that was going to go deaf. These flare-ups can last anywhere between 20 minutes to several hours. And what sucks about them is they're completely unpredictable, which makes the condition even more frustrating. And no one knows exactly what causes that fluid buildup, but scientists think it's a mix of genetic and environmental factors. It may be linked to problems with fluid damage, immune system issues, allergies, or even viruses. And since it affects the inner ear, which controls both balance and hearing, it hits hard on both fronts. There is no cure yet, which is the stinkiest part, but treatments can help reduce how often attacks happen and how intense they are. Things like a low sodium diet, diuretics, which help reduce fluid, vestibular therapy, and in more serious cases, surgery or injections into the ear that can help manage it. Living with Meniere's disease is definitely challenging, but understanding what's going on inside your ear helps take back some control.